Committee to order since it's 4:01 according to my clock, and pretty short agenda items today, but it's going to be a good meeting, and let's start out with a roll call.
All right, thank you. Fredson?
Here.
Sterner?
Here.
Vento?
Here.
I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Wolf is not going to be joining us today. She is absent. Zarin?
I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you. That's great. Thank you. And Lindstrom?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as we do before all of our meetings, I will read the executive order statement from the governor. Governor Walz has declared a peacetime emergency Executive Order 20-01 in response to COVID-19, and the Metropolitan Council Chair has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person Met Council meeting for reasons stated in the governor's emergency executive order. Accordingly, Met Council members will participate in this meeting via telephone or other electronic means, and the Met Council meeting will be conducted under Minnesota Statutes Section 13D 021 at the date and time stated above. That would be right now. This meeting will be streamed live and recorded. We encourage you to monitor the meeting remotely. If you have comments, I encourage members of the public to email us at public.info@metstate.mn.us. We will respond to your comments in a timely manner. All right, that takes us to our third item, approval of the agenda. Without objection, we will move forward with this agenda, taking us to the approval of the minutes from February 9th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes. It says Sterner.
Thank
And
you.
a second? Is there a second?
Vento seconds.
Thank you. Roll call.
Fredson?
Aye.
Sterner?
Aye.
Vento?
Aye.
Wolf is absent. Zarin?
Aye.
And Lindstrom?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And no items on our consent agenda today, which takes us to our non-consent agenda, where we have one item. Mr. LaPierre and Mr. White are going to talk to us about electrical maintenance services for our facilities. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. This is Charles LaPierre. I'll be presenting on business item 2021-63, the electrical maintenance services at MCS facilities. Next slide, please. This is a preventive maintenance contract. Preventive maintenance of electrical systems is critical to the successful and safe operation of the Metropolitan Council treatment processes. And we do this through a process of inspecting, cleaning, testing, the adjustment of our distribution equipment, and then identified repairs as needed. Next slide. Preventive maintenance ties into our adopted maintenance philosophy using the reliability maintenance network. They have a uptime elements which sections out different areas amongst maintenance philosophies and practices. And the plan preventive maintenance aligns with this program in asset condition monitoring. And through this testing, we're able to monitor the condition of our equipment so we can see future deficiencies or imminent deficiencies, which is our early defect elimination. Data collection, we collect this data, we review the data to help determine replacement of equipment, repairs of equipment, and future maintenance cycles. Next slide, please. And through preventive maintenance, we're able to detect our failures earlier in this defect slide. In past practices, we've been farther down towards the flash you see on the screen. We have, since implementing this program, we have been able to come up the defect curve to catching these before defects, and it has virtually eliminated unknown power disruptions to our wastewater treatment plants and the ISBU lift stations that we have performed this maintenance on up to date. Next slide. It also aligns with many state codes, national codes, and industry standards. NFPA 70E mandates that we maintain our equipment to ensure proper arc flash mitigation. NFP 70B sets the standards for how often certain types of equipment need to be, or its recommendations how often certain equipment needs to have an inspection and maintenance performed to them. And then we use the Minnesota state codes for the licensing and the certifications of the technicians doing the testing. Next slide, please. This is just a slide depicting some of the equipment we are doing our testing to. We have 13.8 medium voltage equipment, 480 volt motor controllers, and then the bottom pictures 13.8 to 4160 and 480 volt transformers we have at our compressor building at the Metro plant. Next slide, please. This will be the fourth maintenance contract since we've started in 2006. We have successfully, up to date, tested 98% of the electrical systems at the 9 wastewater treatment facilities and our interceptor service facilities, which are lift stations, metering sites, and regional maintenance, which covers the 7-county metro area. It addresses newly expanded code requirements for testing and documentation. As they update the NFP 70E, we implement that into our testing practices. And as I mentioned earlier, service outages are down to minimal since the implementation of this. The initial preventive maintenance program had us testing and maintaining most of our equipment on a 3-year testing cycle. Since we've implemented this, we have been able to stay within standards and move to a 5-year testing cycle, which has, due to the reliability of our equipment, and which reduces our overall cost. Next slide, please. Why do we contract the inspection and cleaning and testing? One of the main reasons is flexibility to us staffing levels. Each project requires different levels of staffing. We can have as few as 3 electricians on some of these to as much as 12 electricians. They only last a short duration of time. So to try and staff that with on-site staff would create inefficiencies in our budgeting and overall costs. The contractors own and maintain their own equipment. They subcontract when necessary for any equipment they need. They handle the accreditation for the NETA electrical testing standards. Next slide, please. Electrical maintenance services. Contractors were qualified based on successful performance of electrical maintenance contracts in a similar industry setting. Qualifications of the contractor's employees were high voltage experience and certification, electrical maintenance experience, and then also for qualifications for the testing, we required the current NETA accreditation of the company doing the testing, and also NETA certification of the technicians. This ensures that we have qualified people doing the testing that can understand the data they're collecting and are well trained in the repair of this type of equipment. Next slide, please. Background, the invitation for bids advertised on December 11th. 12 plan holders, 5 identified as women, minority, veteran, or disadvantaged business enterprises. Pre-bid meeting hosted by council staff. Bids included cost of services, MCUB plan for meeting the 6% goal was approved by our Office of Equal Opportunity. To address a question that Susan brought up earlier from one of the council members, I do not have the list of the original plan holders. I was only involved in the bid opening, which just had 2 contractors. Next slide, please. Public bid opening was held on February 11th. The 2 bids were received, ranging from the $10.7 million to the $12.3 million. Premier Electric submitted the lowest responsive bid. The contract has a term of 5 years with amount not to exceed $12 million. And because of our past success in creating a reliable distribution system, I did not have to increase this total from the last 5-year contract. Next slide, please. The Metropolitan Council authorized the regional administration to award and execute this contract with Premier Electric Corporation to provide electrical maintenance services at environmental services for the amount not to exceed $12 million for this 5-year contract. Next slide, please. Questions?
Questions to Mr. Lapierre?
Chair, this is Susan. I just wanted to clarify that the question that Mr. Lapierre answered came from Committee Member Zarin.
Thank you.
And at this time, Councilmember Sterner has his hand raised.
Councilmember Sterner, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Lindstrom, Mr. Lapierre. I just had a few questions on the bidding. So like Premier, were they the one that had the contract before, or are they new to Metropolitan Council?
No, they're the previous holders of the contract.
Okay, and then have we ever explored having our own electricians on staff versus like contracting it out? Is that ever been looked at?
Yes, it's been looked at. The issue, as I addressed earlier in the presentation, is the staffing, the constantly fluctuating staffing levels to perform this maintenance would not be efficient or cost effective for the council.
Okay. And then my final one, it just seems like it's a very specialized electrician in there. So it seems like the one who does it, has it. Like, I'm just wondering, in the 5-state area, like, were all 12 of those bids that you received, were they all qualified people, or do they like select themselves away from it because they didn't have enough experience in this area of electrical work?
I can't answer that definitively, because we've only received 2 bids. I do not know the reasons why the other bidders opted not to bid on this project.
Okay, it might be something to find out just, for future reference, like what was status of that, where 12 people took the contract and only got 2 back. It seems like there might be some issues to maybe look at or explore possibly.
I'll send that question over to our contracts department to see if they can get that information for me.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Chair
Thank you.
Lindstrom?
Yes, is this Councilmember Zarin?
Councilmember Zarin here. Chair, I would like to ask a question, if I may.
Please do.
I just want to kind of back up Councilmember Sterner, and we need to know why we're not getting any more than 2 bidders on. This is a plum contract. This is a really good contract for a contractor. this is and I understand the nuances around being able to do an outage or doing a preventative maintenance and being able to have a large enough staff to draw from that's qualified. And Premier has that. I know that firsthand. But they're not the only contractor in that space that can do this. So I want to know what questions were brought up in the pre-bid, and were any of those questions, could any of those questions give us some insight into why we only ended up with 2 bidders in the end?
Some of the questions posed were around the NETA certification, why we require a NETA certification. And the reason why we require a NETA certification is the other certification, NICET, that does testing does not require the contractor to be NETA certified. So the contractor is not experienced or holds the training or the expertise in the data analysis, nor does it require their technicians to actually hold an electrical license to do NICET style training, which, working with the voltages and the equipment we do require them to be a licensed electrician as well as NETA certified.
Do you think that was one of the reasons then why we only got 2 is the NETA certification?
I believe that's one of the reasons, yes.
And were there other questions brought up during the pre-bid meeting that really stood out or came out as potential barriers?
So Chair, this is Susan. I did send the meeting link to Jody Jacoby from our procurement department if we need to address any questions directly to her. Chuck, you can go ahead and respond.
No, I don't believe so. We did open it up to prevailing wage, so other than union contractors were able to look at and take advantage of bidding this. A couple of them were plant holders. I think Vinco was one of them. Some of the other requirements that do limit this is that they have experience working with the size of distribution we have, 10 megawatts or larger, that they also have administered contracts of this size. So that ensures that we get contractors that we know are capable of meeting our needs to fulfill this contract.
Good points. Councilmember Zirin, any other follow-up to those comments?
Chair Lindstrom, thank you for giving me the chance to respond. I'm completely satisfied in the response that I've received here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Right. Other questions?
Chair, we do have Jody Jacoby on the phone with us. Jody, do you have a list of the minority bidders in response to the question from Committee Member Zarin? And Jody, you'll have to unmute.
Mr. Chair and committee members, this is Jody Jacoby, Procurement Director. I apologize for my technology issues. I was live streaming and then tried to jump into the WebEx and I had a lot of voices, dual voices going on. I just want to talk a little bit about the presentation with the number of plan holders. So a plan holder could be a site where they're pushing out information to different firms to give them information about our bidding documents. It certainly doesn't mean it's electrical contractors or vendors. I also can get you information on some of the questions and the addenda asked to follow up to your specific questions about the responsibility, which is the ability to do the work, and then the responsiveness. Did they respond to all the requirements that we outlined in our bidding documents?
That would be great. Any follow-up for Mr. Jacoby? Thank you. And good job, Susan, to rope in Jody ASAP. That was impressive. Good. We need to take a vote on this. Is there a motion to move forward with this item?
Bento moves approval.
Then
you.
seconds.
Motion has been made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our one and only item on our information information item this afternoon is regarding cybersecurity in our sector, and Mr. Knutson is going to walk us through this. I saw in the presentation a little heads up about what happened in Florida, and it's a little nerve-wracking, just what happened last week, just to tee it up a little bit. But yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Roger Knutson. I've worked for Metropolitan Council for 37 years. The first 22 years I've worked as a technology specialist. In the last 15 years, I've been the manager for the Process Computer Group. So today we're going to have an informational item. We're going to talk about critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and the water sector. Next slide, please. So just a quick agenda of what I'll be covering today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background for the critical infrastructure protection, the CIP. We're also going to talk about the operational technology cybersecurity. And just to be clear, when I say operational technology, that's a generic term for systems that control equipment in the plant. For example, if you hear a SCADA system or industrial control system or distributed control system, those are all the same thing. They're all operational technology. Then we'll go through what happened in the Oldsmar Florida water facility. We'll talk a little bit about how that happened. And then I hope to draw some contrasts as to why it's not as likely to happen in our wastewater treatment plants and our collection system. And then also just briefly touch on what our current action plans are. Next slide, please. So the critical infrastructure protection is something that in 1998 President Clinton issued as a presidential directive. It was the first national policy on critical infrastructure protection. It's creating the framework in which CIP policy would evolve. Next slide, please. So in that critical infrastructure, the protection, there were 16, or there currently are 16 critical infrastructure sectors. And you can see here that, well, at least two of them are things that Metropolitan Council does. One is transportation and the other is water. So today we're going to be talking about our world, the environmental services, water. And just to, a note is that a couple of years ago, they actually renamed the water sector as the water wastewater sector. Next slide, please. So the reason that the water sector is so important is that the safe drinking water is a prerequisite for protecting public health and all human activity. Properly treated wastewater is vital to prevent disease and protecting the environment. Thus, ensuring the supply of drinking water and wastewater treatment and service is essential to modern life and the nation's economy. So as a matter of structure, the EPA is the federal agency that is in charge of implementing any requirements of the water sector. Next slide, please. So why is cybersecurity a part of this now? Well, in 2013, President Obama signed an executive order on improving cybersecurity in the infrastructure. The intent of this was to increase the federal government's involvement and work as a partner in trying to define cybersecurity practices and what should be implemented in all these different sectors. Next slide, please. So the latest thing that's happened is the America Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. That's a very long act. It's 129 pages, and only twice in there was the word cybersecurity mentioned. The first time had to do with the Corps of Engineers and waterways, and I think it had even some relevance to the 1972 Clean Water Act. The section that I'm going to focus on a little bit more now, though, is the section in the 2018 Act was to amend the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. And in that amendment, they included that there would be emergency response plans. So each community drinking water system serving a population greater than 3,300 shall include an assessment of the physical security and cybersecurity of the systems. And then they were supposed to keep a copy of that assessment for 5 years. So there's really very little enforcement, if you will, on what that assessment is or what they need to do to it. So the thing I want to point out here too is even though we are a part of the water sector, the drinking water and wastewater, this particular law only amended the Drinking Water Act of 1974, so it only applies to the water supply community. So as far as doing an assessment, that only applies to the water and not wastewater. So we are under we as wastewater, part of the wastewater sector are under no obligation to do this. Although I will point out that we have been doing this since 2008, so we are a full 10 years ahead of when this 2018 Act was passed. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what happened in the Oldsmar plant last month. So on February 5th, attackers accessed the control system software at the Oldsmar water treatment facility in Florida by using remote access to change the set point level of sodium hydroxide dosage in the water from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million. The change was immediately detected by an operator who changed the set point back before the attack had any impact on the system. There were actually 2 attacks that day. The first one was where somebody noticed somebody in the system, but there apparently wasn't any changes to the system. The second one happened 5 hours later, and that's when they noticed that the set point had changed. That was being changed to 11,100. The attack was reported to local authorities and the news went national. Pinellas County Sheriff Office and the FBI and the Secret Service are still working to investigate exactly what happened. Next slide, please. So how did it happen? So the information that has come out so far about this is that the attackers were able to access the Oldsmar water facility into the operations, the OT control system via a piece of software called TeamViewer, which is a remote access software. All computers used by the facility personnel were connected to the OT system and used outdated operating systems. What I saw was that they were all using Windows 7, which was end of life the end of last year. All computers shared the same password for remote access. All computers appeared to be connected directly to the internet without any type of firewall protection. And an interesting thing that came up recently is that on February 2nd, just 3 days before that attack, 3.27 billion unique combinations of clear text email addresses and passwords were leaked in a database by a cyber criminal community. And 13 credential pairs linked to the Oldsmar water facility OT system were found in that database. Now, whether that was a contributing factor to that attack or not, we don't know. I don't think anybody knows yet. That's why they're still doing the investigation. Next slide, please. So in contrast, I want to try to lay out why this sort of attack would be much less successful in our control systems for the wastewater treatment plants and for the interceptor SCADA system. So first off, we restrict remote connections to the OT system that allow physical control and manipulation of equipment. So basically, we do not allow people, even our own staff, to make changes remotely without being directly connected to the OT system. We use read-only connection devices to monitor the OT system remotely. So we do have technology that allows people from home basically to look at the status of a plant or other parts of the facilities. We use firewalls to implement the Purdue Defense in-Depth Network model. And I bring up the firewall because last October, the committee approved the upgrade of the firewall systems for all the wastewater treatment plants and the interceptor system. We also keep all computers, devices, and applications patched and up to date. We have a cadence every month. We go through and we religiously patch all of our computers, and we continually look for firmware upgrades for our hardware. We use multi-factor authentication with unique user accounts and strong passwords. So the difference here is that on our control system, we use unique accounts. So if I told you my access, my account name, you would not necessarily be able to relate that back to Roger Knudsen. And it is not, and so we do not use my email address, for example. It's completely unique, and it's not on the business domain. It's nowhere. The only place it exists is on the OT control network. We use only secure and trusted networks and virtual private networks. We completely block internet connections to the OT system. We only allow short-term exceptions to that through our firewall in case we sometimes need to do that to license some software. Sometimes we need to do that to download a patch or a firmware version or antivirus definition. Sometimes we work with a vendor who we allow them to come through our engineering workstation, and we sit there and we watch what they are doing, but they are literally working through our engineering workstation and not directly from their laptop or whatever from offsite. Very strict controls on that. The other thing that we do, and I'm pretty sure that Oldsmar probably has the same sort of things in place, they just didn't talk about it. We have engineering controls which restrict or clamp set point values for process equipment. So the possibility of putting in 11,100 when your normal set point is 100 wouldn't work. We have a normal range, operating range, that we allow operators to put a set point in. So for example, if 100 is what you normally want to be, my guess is the set point clamps would be probably 0 to 200 or something like that. If anybody tried to put in 11,000, it would reject it as an invalid value. And then above and beyond that, we have other interlocks, permissives, and alarms that provide additional safeguards. I'm guessing Oldsmar has the same sort of thing. I'm sure that if the lye had actually gone into the water, their pH would have gone crazy, and they would have been alerted through an alarm of some sort that was unacceptable, and they would have been able, I'm sure, to shut off that water supply and go to their backup water supply. Next slide, please. So this, I hope, looks familiar. This is the diagram that I presented last October when I asked for funding for the firewalls, the upgrade of our firewalls. And just the reason I wanted to bring this up again is because our system is set up like this. It's the Purdue model defense in-depth strategy. And in this case, layer 2 is basically where it's called the local HMI, human machine interface, that it is the equivalent of the machine that the Oldsmar operator was looking at when that set point was changed. You can see in our, the way we've structured that, it's pretty deep in our defense in-depth network. So between the internet And that particular piece of equipment, we have 3 layers, which really, and it has to go through different firewalls and different ways of routing that kind of information. And like I said, we totally have blocked the internet from that particular HMI, local HMI. In the case of Oldsmar, and what they were saying is that there was no firewall in place. Basically, everything that you're looking at on that diagram was on layer 5. Everything was connected to the internet. There was no protection, no defense in depth strategy implemented. My guess is the operators probably also checked their Outlook email. They did time cards, they did procurement, they did whatever else. They did everything on that one computer, and which leads to that vulnerability of being able to access it from the internet. Next slide, please. So another thing that we do very religiously is we keep up to date on things. So we monitor communications from state and federal agencies for security advisories. To the left, you'll see an email. It's a sort of email that I get once or twice a day normally. It's from the Industrial Control Systems Cyber Emergency Response Team, or ICS CERT. And what the intent of this is, when they find out, this is the federal government coming from the federal government now. This is one of the agencies that President Obama actually created with his executive order, and it's an information sharing part of the agency. And the reason I listed this one is because we do have, see listed 3 releases of control system advisories. One of them was Rockwell Automation. The reason that drew my attention is we do have Rockwell automation technology in our plants. Fortunately, we do not have factory talk. Fortunately, this advisory for this vulnerability did not apply to our plants. But we see these advisories virtually every day, and we keep track of when something does apply. We do follow up and find out exactly what it is we need to mitigate that vulnerability. We obviously keep up with trade journals. We track OT manufacturer, new technology and advancements. We partner with other water sector utilities. Particularly, I have talked to City of Minneapolis and the City of St. Paul water districts, and just to kind of find out what they were doing for the assessment that they had to do officially starting in 2018. So it's just good to make those connections and see how other people are approaching these things. And then finally, we definitely engage with local and national user groups. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is continue our current action plan. And that is that we conduct Department of Homeland Security evaluations and we act on findings. We start, the first one we did was 2008. And we normally do them every usually 3 years, basically. And the reason you do it that far apart is because you find things in these evaluations and it just takes time to do something about it, to mitigate it. You have to come up with a plan, you have to come up with a design, you got to buy equipment and or software. So it just takes time to address the highest priority items that it finds. We're actually due for a evaluation now. We actually asked for one this year, and the people that we talked to said, as soon as the election is done, come and talk to us. So maybe this year we'll get one. The other thing we do is we very closely follow the NIST standard guideline. It's 882R2, specifically designed for cybersecurity and cybersecurity preparedness. We definitely support sufficient staff levels and training to implement all this cybersecurity and just the control systems in general, good health. We support OT system hardware and software upgrade budgeting. Obviously, ES committee is a very important part of that, making sure that when we do need to upgrade something, that you fully understand why and support that. We do keep documentation secure and updated. Secure is very important because a big part of cybersecurity or cyber hacking, I should say, is that attackers will try to get into a system whether it's a control system, maybe it's a business system, and they'll actually do reconnaissance. They'll look for documentation. They'll look for information about your control system, and they'll basically reverse engineer what you have and find vulnerabilities. So we do our best to keep our documentation secure. We ensure resilient and operational technology systems per plant, and that's by design. The internet could completely go away and our plants would continue to run and treat wastewater just like if they were connected to the WAN. And obviously we optimize what we already have. That's very important. We spend a lot of money on control systems and cybersecurity. It's best to get everything that we can out of them. We continuously improve the ESOT system cybersecurity posture by doing all these practices. And one thing I like to do particularly, and I hope I'm doing it today, is I promote cybersecurity awareness among all of our employees and even outside our organizations. I promote it even in our employees' families, because it makes a big difference, especially in these times of teleworking now, where a lot of people are on their home internet or whatever. It's just good to have good cybersecurity hygiene everywhere that people are working. So next slide, please. Yep, and that's it. So thank you for the time today, Mr. Chair and committee members. If you'd like to ask any questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
Good cybersecurity hygiene. I'm going to remember that one. That's important. Good point and great presentation. Fascinating. Questions for Roger? I'm not able to see everybody, so just go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, Councilmember Vento. Mr. Knudsen, thank you very much. I find this area fascinating and have been particularly interested in the last several months. You showed on one of the slides the email that you get regularly, and I'm wondering from your reading of those emails whether that feels as though there's been an uptick in the Oldsmar type instances, probably not to that degree, but and probably not getting the kind of news that they got in Florida. But if you've noticed an increased sensitivity.
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes. Relative to the email that I showed, not necessarily, because that was vendor specific or manufacturer specific, but for me, and I would say other people that follow this pretty closely, this is not a surprise. This is something that we know is very possible, and mainly because there are so many different water providing communities. I think there's around 54,000 in the United States, and they all serve. And I think that's the limit was like 50,000 people that they serve. So in the case of Oldsmar, that was a community of 15,000. The interesting part about that is that it was basically 2 days before the Super Bowl and 15 miles away. So was this hacker looking for attention, or what was the motivation? That's one thing it's hard to come up with, is the why. The thing that, the reason it's not really surprising is because I saw an article also where there have been 111 such reported attacks in the second half of 2020. So the reason why the sheriff Pinellas County decided to make this public, I don't know. It's normally something people don't talk about. And it's for a couple different reasons. Communities don't want to talk about why they got attacked. So yes, I don't see an uptick in necessarily manufacturer vulnerabilities, but definitely I would hope that there's more water communities, or just industrial communities in general, that share more of this information about how attacks are happening.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask one more question. You mentioned the data breach on February 2nd. this may be part of the investigation, and there may not be an answer yet, Mr. Knudsen, but I'm wondering, from your reading of the articles, do you know when they discovered the February 2nd incident? Was it after the February 5th, or did they know about it on February 5th?
Mr. Chair and committee members, it was discovered on the 2nd. Yes, it was February 2nd when it was released, and at least at that point, the cyber crime community knew all about it.
What would be the impact of 11,100 parts per million of lye going into Tampa Bay?
Well,
Pretty significant, I imagine.
yeah. So, Mr. Chair and committee members, so in this case, this is drinking water. So it would go into the taps of the people in the community, and the impact would be it's very caustic. It's lye, basically, and so it'd make a lot of people really sick. But I think, like you said, I think I'm sure there had been enough interlocks and alarms and such downstream telling them there's a problem. And I know that Oldsmar, they have a secondary water supply that they can buy water from a neighboring community. So my guess is they would have just shut the plant down, switched the valve over, and continued on.
Pat on the back to that operator who noticed it right away.
Yes. And I think that was an indication of the lack of sophistication of this attack. And because if you really wanted to cause some harm, you would do that at 2 o'clock in the morning. You would not do that while an operator's sitting in front of it. And so, again, it'd be interesting to find out who actually did that and what the motivation was.
Well, and I'm glad you came before the committee last fall, I believe it was, to ask for some resources on beefing up our firewall.
Yes,
always good to be prepared and hope that you never have to use it, right?
Right. Yeah, Mr. Chair and committee members, I feel very confident about what environmental services have done to protect their control system. We are, I consider, a very hard target versus a whole bunch of soft targets out there. And that's kind of what you want to be. You want to be the hard target. It's the old joke about you don't have to be the fastest person. You just have to be faster than the slowest person when the lion's chasing you, right?
Right. Other questions or comments? Well, thanks again. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work, keeping us safe.
Okay, Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. And that takes us to our final item. Lisa, General Manager's report.
Actually, don't have a report tonight. I was hoping the sun would be shining and everybody would be happy to get out and get some sunshine in.
Well, speaking of which, this time last year we were probably throwing a lot of dirt around the metro plant, making sure that the Mississippi River didn't cause us any headaches. That doesn't seem to be quite as much of an issue this year, for better or for worse. Better for us. So I don't know, but the environment, a warmer year, but
better year so far, but we always say knock on wood because you never know what the weather's going to do. It always needs to average out, it seems. And so maybe what we're missed in snow this winter will make up with rain. Hopefully it won't come in, big deluges, and it'll be spread out over time, which is better for the environment and for us too.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, I got the news that we are hitting the 70% mark on the getting our seniors vaccinated. We're watching that closely because we want to get especially our on-site workers to get vaccinated as soon as we can. And I think they're still in a class 1C. So
okay,
they got
they'd be up next.
No, actually, I suppose depending upon how you define next. the two groups that the governor just announced are eligible. I think our folks will be in the next group that would be announced. So that could be a true statement to say they're next, but not the current ones covered.
Soon, hopefully.
Yeah. But things are moving a lot faster, so that's a hopeful sign for everybody.
No question. Well, thank you, everybody. If there's nothing else, I will gavel us adjourned.